Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa van Dijk, and in today's video I want to talk about why I generally think acne trigger foods are misleading. Because I do not think acne usually comes down to one food by itself. The bigger problem is how the whole diet is structured and how the sodium-potassium ratio can shift in favor of sodium. So ideally the day should move more in favor of potassium, because potassium-rich whole foods help keep the body's fluid balance calmer. Too much sodium can push the body toward holding more water and pressure. And because I see breakouts as pressure points in the skin, this ratio becomes extremely important. For my acne, this is what mattered the most. And I genuinely think this is one of the biggest overlooked issues in acne, if not the biggest. And that is why diet becomes so important, but also why it can be so tricky to solve if you do not know what to look for. Because you can get completely misled by food categories that are labeled as unhealthy or healthy. So one person can eat something that looks terrible and still do surprisingly well, while someone else can eat something that looks healthy and still keep breaking out. And to me it was not random, but hidden in the way modern meals are kind of assembled, because many of us try to build meals around nutritional guidelines instead of just eating the whole foods. So I want to show you three people. Person one is what I would call the chaotic eater. This is the person who looks like he should be the example of everything going wrong. He is the one where you look at his plate and think, okay, this is probably not going to end well. But somehow his skin stays fairly calm. He might have a pimple here and there, but that's about it. Person two is the health-conscious eater. This is the person who has read every guidelines, chooses the healthy foods, probably feels very responsible ordering the bowl, and still gets misled because the problem is hidden inside the pattern. And person three is the simple wheel food eater. This is the person who is almost annoying because she is not doing anything special. She is not hacking her diet or chasing every trend. She just eats food that still looks like food. And because of that, she somehow becomes the difficult friend or daughter when everyone else wants the same processed food. And I want to use these three people as examples to show you how misleading the surface of a diet can be. So when we go through their meals, I want you to look at this from the acne pattern and not from what looks healthy on the surface. So let's start with person one. Person one starts the morning with dairy ice cream, maybe chocolate. And this already sounds wrong because nobody looks at ice cream in the morning and thinks, yes, this is clearly the acne-safe breakfast. But if we look at the sodium-potassium ratio, it actually becomes funny because the dairy base already brings potassium with it. And if it is chocolate ice cream, then the cocoa can add even more. So in this example, the ice cream may bring around 80 milligrams of sodium and around 180 to 250 milligrams of potassium. That means the ratio can be roughly 1 to 3 in favor of potassium, which is actually fantastic. So the problem with regular ice cream is not the ratio. The problem is that it usually comes with a lot of added sugar, and your teeth will definitely not send you a thank you card. Then he has a cookie with coffee or soft drink. Again, this is not exactly a beautiful health routine, but it is also not adding a huge sodium load. So the day still does not really collapse from the acne angle. Then at lunch, he is already in a fast food mood and goes for chicken wings with fries. But he does not like when the fries are too salty, so he takes the fries without added salt because the wings are already flavorful enough. And this tiny detail, which he is doing without even realizing it, changes a lot. Because now the fries are still potatoes, and potatoes bring a lot of potassium. So even though the meal looks like the perfect acne trigger meal from the outside, the ratio is not as bad as you would expect. In the image, the lunch is around 1000 milligrams of sodium and around 950 milligrams of potassium. So it is almost neutral. Then for dinner, he orders pizza from his favorite place, because the whole day was already a bit off and now he thinks he should make it a little healthier. So he chooses ricotta and spinach instead of pepperoni pizza. because spinach is leafy greens and leafy greens are what they want him to eat. So he's basically doing wellness now. But unknowingly, the pizza actually does not destroy the pattern either. It has sodium, of course, but the ricotta spinach bring a large amount of potassium too, because spinach is actually very rich in it. And in this example, it comes out around 1,100 milligrams of sodium and around 1,000 milligrams of potassium. So by the end of the day, person 1 looks like he has done everything wrong with ice cream, cookies, rings, fries, pizza, but his estimated daily sodium-potassium balance is still around 1:1. And that is why his acne can actually stay more stable than you would expect. So he is the one where you really start questioning what is going on, because from the outside, you would think his diet has to be the biggest problem. Now he likely will get other problems, especially if he keeps eating like this every day. But from the acne pattern, his day is not as bad as it looks, because the ratio is not shifting that aggressively. It is not ideal, but it stays fairly stable compared to what you would expect from a diet that looks like this chaotic. And that becomes even more interesting when we compare to person 2, because person 2 is the health-conscious one. This is the person who thinks she's doing everything right. She starts with whole grain toast and then puts sardines, olives or smoked salmon on top. And I chose these foods on purpose because they are often recommended. They sound healthy, they sound Mediterranean, they sound like someone has finally become responsible. But if she's choosing sardines from a can, olives from a jar or smoked salmon from a package, that breakfast can quickly become very sodium heavy. So yes, the whole grain toast adds a considerable amount of potassium, but the salty toppings bring so much sodium that that ratio flips. And this is where it now becomes very confusing. Because the ice cream breakfast looked worse, but this healthy breakfast is much more sodium heavy. So person 1 may have worse teeth, but person 2 may have worse skin. Then person 2 has nuts as a snack. And again, nuts look healthy. And she added them because the health source said that she needs fiber, minerals and more healthy fats. But she goes for a salted mix. So again, the food looks healthy, but a large amount of sodium comes with it. And now the same pattern keeps repeating. Then at lunch, she gets a bowl. Brown rice, kale, turkey or tuna, a few slices of avocado, maybe some healthy oils drizzled over it, and then a creamy dressing on top. And from the outside, this looks like the meal that should fix everything. It looks clean, it looks balanced, and it looks like the person is making good choices. But the bowl is not just plain brown rice, kale, turkey or tuna and avocado. The protein can already be salted, the dressing can add a lot of sodium, and when it is prepared outside the home, the sodium can climb very quickly. So the bowl may look healthy, but it does not really push the ratio in favor of potassium. And in this example, it is estimated at around 1,000 milligrams of sodium and only around 800 milligrams of potassium. So it is not necessarily a single acne trigger food, but it is also not helping the pattern. Then in the evening, she thinks, okay, I should follow a bit of a Mediterranean diet. So she gets Greek chicken, Slovakia platter with extra feta and olives. And again, this sounds healthy. Chicken, olives, feta, maybe some salad, maybe some olive oil. But this is where the hidden sodium becomes brutal. The chicken can be marinated. The feta is salty. The olives are salty. The sauces are salty, and the whole meal can easily become a sodium bomb. Now in the image, dinner is around 1,600 milligrams of sodium and only around 500 milligrams of potassium. So by the end of the day, person 2 has followed almost every trendy health guideline she could imagine. She chose whole grains, fatty fish, olives, nuts, chicken, kale, olive oil, feta, and a Mediterranean-style dinner. And still, the whole day was pushing sodium again and again. So now she is confused because she thinks she is eating healthy, so of course it cannot be her diet. And then she ends up right back where she started, thinking it must be the hormones, genes or something completely outside of her control. And in a sense, she's right about the hormones, because her hormones are trying to regulate a body that has been marinating in salt all day. But that is a problem. It is not one food causing everything. It is the whole structure of the eating pattern that keeps shifting the day towards sodium, and she does not even realize it because it is hidden. And then we have person 3, who is not trying to be fancy at all. She just eats real food. In the morning she has eggs, toast, a banana, and sometimes an iced Nescafe. So there is some sodium, but the banana brings potassium, and the meal is not overloaded with salty extras. In this example, the breakfast is around 250 milligrams of sodium and around 500 milligrams of potassium. So already the ratio is much more in favor of potassium. Then for snack, she has a guava. Very simple. I would say that it is almost too simple for the internet, but it works. It brings around 350 milligrams of potassium and basically no sodium, so the day keeps moving in the right direction. Then for lunch, person 3 has chicken thighs or legs with a baked potato and tomatoes. And this is where the difference becomes very obvious. The potato brings a lot of potassium, the tomatoes bring potassium too, and because the meal is not covered in salty sauces or restaurant dressings, the sodium stays controlled. So the lunch is around 250 milligrams of sodium and around 1,500 milligrams of potassium. That is a completely different pattern. Then at dinner she eats a whole fish with yellow sweet potato and a homemade yogurt dip. Not salmon, because apparently salmon has become the official fish of heavily marketed health advice. And she finds it too heavy and oily anyway, so she goes for a white fish like snapper. She adds a sweet potato and she makes the yogurt dip herself with garlic, herbs and a few flakes of salt. So the meal has flavor, but it is not turned into a salty delivery system. In this example, dinner is around 350 milligrams of sodium and around 1,300 milligrams of potassium. So by the end of the day, person 3 has a sodium-potassium balance around 1 to 3. And from my experience, this is the strongest anti-acne setup because the whole day is finally built around foods that naturally bring potassium while added salt stays low. And this is why I think acne trigger foods are so misleading. Because if you only look at single foods, person 1 looks like the worst eater, person 2 looks like the best eater, and person 3 looks almost too simple to be interesting. But when you look at the whole day, the pattern changes. Person 1 is chaotic, but the ratio stays surprisingly stable. Person 2 looks healthy, but her ratio is the most off. Person 3 keeps things simple and her ratio is clearly the best. Now the irony is here that the person who followed the health rules is actually the one who can suffer the most, because she has become a victim of the modern food industry. So she thinks she's doing everything right, because the food has right labels, like whole grain, Mediterranean, olive oil, nuts, fish, leafy greens, healthy fats. But the sodium kept coming in through every meal. And that is what she missed. And person 3 does not need to overthink it that much. She likes whole food, keeps food simple, and cooks mostly for herself. And when she does eat street food or eats out, she just asks if they can skip the sauces or use less salt, which most vendors are actually happy to do. She eats food in between and she does not add many processed foods. So her potassium intake is high relative to her salt intake, and her body is not constantly fighting the ratio. That is why I no longer think acne trigger foods are real in the way people talk about them. So food only looks like a trigger when you ignore the diet it enters, because the same food can behave differently depending on the baseline of the body. And that baseline is shaped by the whole day or even the week or the general eating pattern. So processed food flips the sodium-potassium ratio, and whole food fixes it. That is the acne pattern I have consistently seen over my entire 2 years of daily tracking. And once you fix the baseline, the skin finally has a reason to calm down as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!